This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the amazing platform to build a lovely online presence. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here today. So this is an April, yes, April wrap-up. I was going to say, is that the correct month? Semi-April wrap-up, just recent books that I've read recently. Some books I've read recently. I was kind of delayed with my April wrap-up, so I'm just going to make this somewhat of a recent read. All of these books are classics, except one, and I am ridiculously excited because I feel like I'm finally getting back into my classics groove, because I have been talking about it all the time. Almost every video I mention that I have been in a really bad reading slump pretty much all of 2023, and it has been quite frustrating. And I love classics. You guys know how much I love classics. So I have a bunch of books that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. All of them are classics except one, like I said. So without further babbling on, I'm just going to start talking about these wonderful classics. So the first one was a reread, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I read this, I want to say in 2019, and I grew up watching the Disney adaptation as well as the many Disney adaptations. The cartoon, the one with Robin Williams' Hook, which was always my favorite, the other Peter Pan adaptation that was a live action. I love the story of Peter Pan, and so I was really excited to read this back in, I think I said 2019, maybe even 2017, 2018, and I was surprised to not fully love the written story. So I really wanted to reread it and see how I would feel later on now that some years have passed. I reread it and I really enjoyed it. I don't know why I didn't love it the first time around. The story is so wonderful, and obviously it's a classic, but I feel like this is one of those classics that is like a classic of all classics, where even people who don't read classics or love to read in general know the story of Peter Pan because of all the adaptations and movies, and it's like in our culture, it's in pop culture as well as just in culture in general. And I love that the concept of this boy Peter who doesn't want to grow up, and the concept of the Lost Boys and Neverland, and just everything about the whimsy of Peter Pan, the magic of Peter Pan. I think it's such a whimsical, wonderful story, and it really captures the hard parts of childhood and adolescence and growing up and feeling like we don't have a choice whether we grow up or not. And for me, I always try to keep the child inside of me, or at least I really don't want to lose it as I get older, because I think having your child at heart is so important. I look back at my childhood and I always think like I wish that I appreciated it more. So yes, I just feel like this is such a wonderful story, and the message behind it of childhood and growing up and adolescence is beautifully done, and it's just, I think, a book that everybody should read, especially if you love the adaptations. I think it's really wonderful. The writing is gorgeous. The end of the book is incredibly moving. So I love Peter Pan. I have no clue why I didn't enjoy it on the first read. I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe if I could talk to past Carolyn, I would ask her, but... And then the next one I filmed a whole reading vlog or book review about, so I won't talk about it too much, and that is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This, if you guys have been with me for a very long time, you know that this was always my least favorite classic, and also this is like kind of ripping, so I'm trying to be gentle with it. This was always my least favorite classic. I read it in high school and I absolutely hated it. I thought that Holden Caulfield, the main character, was horrible and annoying and just very dislikable. So this was in high school when I was about 16, and now I'm 24 and I reread it for the first time and I loved it. And so if you want to hear all of my thoughts about The Catcher in the Rye, I will link the video where I talk about it. I think Holden is very misunderstood, and he's dealing with a lot that I feel like went over my head on the first read. Something that someone commented on that video was that he's writing this... Actually, I don't really want to give... I don't want to give that because that's kind of a spoiler, but I found it really interesting if you're curious to find that comment in that video. It's about where he's writing this from, because he's kind of writing it like a journal, and he's talking to someone. He always references like, you didn't know this person, or like, you weren't there, or something like that. And so he is writing to someone, or at least to a reader. But there is speculation about who he's writing it to and who's reading it, which I found really, really interesting, and I feel like adds even more depth to this book. I just feel like for a high school student, for me in particular, a lot of it went over my head and I just didn't appreciate it, and now it's one of my favorite classics, which I cannot believe because my hatred for this book was just so strong. And I wasn't expecting for it to be a new favorite, so I absolutely loved The Catcher in the Rye. And if you want to hear more of my specific thoughts, I talk about different scenes in the book, and I read out different scenes in that video, so if you want to hear a little bit more, then you can watch that. And then the next book that I finally finished, I don't know why it took me so long to read this book, especially because it is so short, and that is I Have More Souls Than One by Fernando Pessoa. This is a Penguin Modern, one of the thin ones, and this is number 19, and it is a small collection of his poetry from different collections. So he is a poet that wrote in different personas, and they all had their different personalities and characteristics and writing styles, and he wrote in these different personalities. And so there's a collection, this collection has from multiple of his different personalities or alter egos, and I loved his writing. This was the first Fernando Pessoa collection or writing that I've ever read, and I found it so incredibly beautiful and moving, and I connected to so many of the poems that he wrote in here. A few of my favorites I can just tell you because I did make note of them. Master Serene is one of them. I did dog-ear the pages, so I apologize if you don't like dog-earing pages. So many of them, but Hate You, Christ, I Do Not. The Wind at Peace is really beautiful as well. I Want is also gorgeous. All of them, but those are the ones that I specifically dog-eared. I wrote in the margins of this one, let's see, which one is this one? Tobacconists, which I really, really liked. All of them are so, so beautiful though. Oh, and the first poem I loved. It is from The Keeper of Sheep, which I think is a longer poem, but it's like a short section of a longer poem, and I found it incredibly beautiful. The back says, written in the voices of 4 different alter egos, these rich, strange, and mesmeric verses by Portugal's greatest poet express a maelstrom of conflicted thoughts and feelings, which is very true. I think what I loved so much about Pessoa's writing was how he expressed his emotions. Obviously, that's what poetry is all about, but I feel like he did it in a really unique way in these different personas. And like it says on the back, they are very strange, rich, and mesmeric, and just very vivid. I felt like they all came to life and were full of color, and the way that he even described scenery, I think is so incredible when you have descriptive poetry. I think is really beautiful, because of course we have descriptive prose, which prose is of course descriptive, but I think describing something in poetry is just incredibly beautiful, and I think a really great gift that a writer can have. So I loved this, and I can't wait to read more Pessoa. I really want to read the Book of Disquiet, which I do have, so hopefully I'll read that soon, but I don't know when. Before I continue on to the rest of the books, a quick word from our lovely sponsor who I adore working with, Squarespace. Squarespace is a website builder which easily allows people to create engaging and unique websites. I have now made my website portfolio through Squarespace, and I couldn't be happier with the results. They have so many wonderful and easy-to-use features, such as built-in and customizable page layouts, as well as amazing design tools so you can personalize your website to your heart's content. You can even schedule your post to be published in the future, which is always extremely helpful. From websites, creative portfolios, online stores, and analytics, Squarespace is the perfect platform to build a lovely online presence and run your business. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Carolyn Marie Reads to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. The next book I actually picked up pretty recently. I was at the library working on my writing, and I went into my library's little bookshop, and they had this book, and I'd never read it before. Some English classes read it in my high school, but the English class that I took didn't read it, and that is George Orwell's Animal Farm. So I read 1984 in my English class for, I think it was my last year of high school, senior year. Anyway, but we didn't read Animal Farm, and I know that so many people love Animal Farm. I love George Orwell's 1984. I haven't read, I don't think, anything else from him, so this was my second Orwell, and I thought that the concept was brilliant. So if you are unfamiliar with the concept, this is basically about a farm. It says on the back, a farm is taken over by its overworked and mistreated animals, which I think is such a great concept. You guys know how much I love anthropomorphic animals, anthropomorphic animal characters in stories where animals take on human qualities, and this is like the ultimate anthropomorphic animal book. Like all of the characters are humanized animals, which is so funny, and that's the whole concept of the book, is that the animals are taking over the farm to go against the humans, but then ultimately they sort of become somewhat human. And then another thing, oh god, I lost my train of thought. I was just gonna reference something else and I completely lost my train of thought. This always happens to me. Why? It was something about the animals becoming more human. I was gonna reference something else. Oh god, this is going to bother me so much now. Anyway, this always happens to me. I'm gonna keep reading the back. With flaming idealism and stirring slogans, they set out to create a paradise of progress, justice, and equality. Thus, the stage is set for one of the most telling satiric fables ever penned, a razor-edged fairy tale for grown-ups that records the evolution from revolution against tyranny to a totalitarianism just as terrible. When Animal Farm was first published, Stalinist Russia was seen as its target. Today it is devastatingly clear that wherever and whenever freedom is attacked, under whatever banner, the cutting clarity and savage comedy of George Orwell's masterpiece have... Shouldn't that be has? No. Have a meaning? Oh no. Have a meaning and message. Still furiously fresh. Okay. That was a struggle. I think I could not agree more. George Orwell's message is so incredibly clear, and I really love that. He doesn't kind of beat around the bush. He's just sort of like, I'm going to use animals to tell you what's messed up in societies. And I think that's brilliant, and that's what makes me think of books and stories having so much power, and that Orwell's weapon of choice was his pen and his voice, and he used that to go against or go towards what he believed in, speak out on what he believed in. And I think that's incredibly beautiful, and that's the power of being an author, and the power of having a voice that other people listen to and read, is to spread awareness or positivity, activism, in a hopefully positive light. It's just such a well-written book and has such power to it, so I really, really enjoyed Animal Farm. The next two books I listened to on audiobook, and the first one was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This was my first experience reading or listening to Kafka, and I was wrapping a bunch of Etsy orders because I just had my Etsy shop was restocked, and thank you guys so much for all of your support for that. And I love listening to audiobooks while I wrap all of the orders and everything. And so I decided to, on a whim, listen to Metamorphosis by Kafka. And like I said, I've never read anything from him before, and I loved it. I thought it was incredible. I have a really hard time, I was trying to think about what I was going to say about it, and I'm having a really hard time coming up with concrete thoughts about it because I just think that it's so grand. and brilliant that what can I say about it to do it justice? I think what I loved most was not only reading the story but also researching about Kafka after I finished reading and learning about his life and how his life affected his writing, as well as his influences. He was influenced by Charles Dickens as well as Fyodor Dostoevsky, which I was not surprised about at all because as I was reading Metamorphosis, it really reminded me of The Double by Dostoevsky, which is a fantastic story. It's one of my favorites from Dostoevsky. And when I was reading the Metamorphosis, I was thinking to myself, this really kind of reads like or is giving me similar feelings as Dostoevsky does. And now, after that, learning that Dostoevsky was one of his influences, it completely makes sense. And I found Kafka's life incredibly tragic, what he went through and his relationships, his family relationships, and how that affected his writing and everything. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the concept of the metamorphosis, this young man turning into, or metamorphosizing into this bug, and how his family is treating him and or mistreating him, and everyone's response and his own thoughts about what's going on. I found it incredibly deep and moving, and I would love to read it physically because I feel like I want to kind of dive deeper into the actual written text and not just listen to the story, but I thought the audiobook was fantastic. The narration was great. There is a narration narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch, but that's abridged. And so I listened to the abridged one, and I listened to the unabridged one, and then I listened to the abridged one, and then I watched about about like 10 to 15 videos on the Metamorphosis and Franz Kafka because I was incredibly fascinated. It kind of felt like my feelings towards when I was researching about Russian literature in the beginning, when I was getting into Russian lit and I was doing so much research about Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all of my favorite writers, as well as, other writers, not just them. But I love doing author research. So yes, I'm really excited to read more Kafka, and yeah, so I really enjoyed the Metamorphosis, and I think that it's a fantastic story, absolutely brilliant. Devastating in so many ways, but I love a good devastating read. The other audiobook that I listened to is the only non-classic on this list, and it is a nonfiction as well, a recent nonfiction from the writer Mark Manson, and that is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It is a self-help nonfiction about what is the subtitle to it? The subtitle is A Counterintuitive Approach to Living a Good Life, and Mark Manson basically goes into why you should not give a fuck or care about certain aspects of life and the beauty of not giving a fuck. There's so much duality to it. Like, of course he says that there are things that you should care about, but there are also things that there is an art to not caring about them, and it will lead to you living a better life. So many of the things that he spoke about and the topics that he brought up really, really resonated with me. One of them in particular was what you are willing to struggle for. What you're willing to struggle for is what you are willing to put the work into. And I found that incredibly moving because he was talking about how people who are entrepreneurs or freelancers, they do that because they are willing to struggle. They are willing to deal with the struggles that come with that because that is the lifestyle that they want or that works for them. I just pulled up the exact quote, and it says, "Who you are is defined by what you are willing to struggle for." He was talking about it in a lot of different scenarios, and it just really resonated with me, especially with when he was talking about freelancing and dealing with the struggle of that, and hopefully thinking that I'm going to work through the struggle so that it pays off in the end. That just really hit home for me. Let's see what other quotes I can find. I really like this one as well. "The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience, and paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience." Which I kind of love those like mind muddles where it really makes you think, because obviously it is known that we learn a lot more from our failures than our successes, and that's even something that he brings up as well. And that we know what is good because we know what is bad. We know what is positive because we know what is negative. And we need that balance to understand each one and each emotion. So I will leave you with one final quote, and that is, "This is the most simple and basic component of life. Our struggles determine our successes." And I think that that's really great. So yes, I really enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. The final book that I want to mention, I'm not going to talk too much on because I want to film a whole reading vlog and book discussion for it. And I've also just started it, so I don't have too much to say, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So we are reading this for the Game of Tomes book club. I love Dostoevsky. I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while. Every time I make a video about Russian literature, at least 1 or 10 people tell me to read this book, so I'm finally reading it. I am how many pages in? I am 176 pages in, and I am really, really enjoying it. I don't want to say too much because I really want to talk about it more deeply in its own separate video. What I will say is that Dostoevsky's writing is amazing. I love being back in his words and in his mind and in his world. The characters are very interesting. What else do I want to say? The topics that he's discussing, especially religion, are very, I don't know, masterfully done. Very interesting, making me think a lot. I feel like this book, above all of his other books, is making me really question my own beliefs and my own feelings towards what is being discussed, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's all that I'm going to say about The Brothers Karamazov. I did put all of these orange tabs to like section out and break down the book so that I read like one little section every day for the amount of time that we are reading the book for the book club for. So that is what all of the orange tabs are for. But I have already started tabbing things, and I'm really loving it. So I'm not surprised because I had a feeling that I was going to love The Brothers Karamazov because literally I have not heard like a single bad thing about it. Everybody just says that it's one of the greatest books ever written and it's life-changing and all those wonderful, wonderful things. So anyway, those are all of the books that I have to talk to you about today and that I have read recently. So I would love to know what books you are reading, what books you have read recently, and if you have read any of these books, what you think about them. I would just love to hear from you in the comments. Oh, before I forget, I do want to mention that this coming Saturday, which is the 13th, let me just check that really quick before I mess up. Saturday the 13th, I'm hoping to get this video up by Friday, if not, oh well. We're hoping to have our Catcher in the Rye live show on Saturday the 13th, I think at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will confirm that in the description of this video. It is also just on my channel. It is in the live section of my channel. Anyway, so just to put that in there before I forget. I almost forgot. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're having a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and happy reading.